Hello, my Logic friends. Happy Sunday, and there's already people in the chat. And what a wonderful first commenter there. John Ag, good morning. Good morning to you in Australia. David Kreitz, hello. Sabil, hello. Andy Milkus, whoa. There you are. Hello, Andy. Philip, hello. Josh Lawrence, hello. Hello, everybody. This is amazing. It's great to see you all. It is a beautiful day. I can see, although it's blown out, behind me is a beautiful, beautiful backyard here in Queens. We have an incredible show. I'm insanely excited for everything that Bryan Bayley has to offer, although he did just leave the call, so we'll have to see what that means. But until then, hello everybody. Welcome to Logic Live. My name's Jeff Kyle. Amazing show here today. Thank you all for joining me. Before we get into it, and I have to just hold my breath that Bryan does indeed come back, we have some messages from our sponsors and some little announcements to make, so why don't we get into that? This episode of Logic Live is brought to you by Looper, the platform that allows you to stream your sessions, be it Flame or otherwise, with very low latency, tons of chat features, and some super flexible plans. We have a special deal for Logic friends who are new customers to Looper. If you use the link right here on the screen, beautiful, tinyurl.com/looper-logic. When you sign up to Looper, instead of getting the free account, you get 1 month of their Plus plan for free. A great way to see if this service might make sense for you. And our other quite familiar sponsor is none other than our many friends over at Boris FX. If you need Boris FX plugins, you can save 15% on all of the Boris FX products that we know and love. Everything here on the screen available with a great discount if you use our affiliate links located right here, Lens Flare. Head on over to logic.tv/BorisFX. And I lost my train of thought, but logic.tv/BorisFX and click on one of the links there for some fantastic savings from our friends over at Boris FX. We have a merch store with beanies, notebooks. My wife got me a Logic notebook for Christmas. That was lovely. Stickers and much more. Pick up some Logic merch at the merch store on the logic.tv website. It is patron time, and a huge shout out to everyone helping to support what makes this show happen right here, right now, week after week. Thank you for that. Here is our up-to-date patron list. Just updated it yesterday evening. Thank you and a moment for every one of these people here on the screen right now. We are clocking in at 156 patrons as of this week. Again, big thank you to everyone listed here for supporting the community. If you would like to support what we're doing here on Logic, and it is very much appreciated, you do get a few bonus perks, and my favorite is and has always been the patrons Q&A chat that we do just after just about every show, where in this case, after the show, we're heading over to Zoom to talk more with my special guest, Bryan Bayley, to chat some more about what he'll be talking about today, preferences, presets, and hotkeys, oh my, and all things new in Flame 2025. We'll dig a little bit deeper over there. So if you aren't already, head on over to patreon.com/logictv and support for as little as $5 a month. If you haven't heard, Logic Academy Pro is a learning platform put together by Logic co-founder, forum troll, and Discord wrangler Randy McEntee that takes what Andy started here on YouTube and pretty much brings it to the next level, or really several levels. It's a monthly subscription, and it connects you with a handful of diverse Flame artist instructors to level up your Flame skills. I know Randy's putting the finishing touches on the Flame 201 series, as he has been, but he's a full-time Flame artist. He's a busy guy. He's getting there. There's quite a large volume of content up there, so take a look. I think all of the NAB classes that we did, some of us did at NAB, have been uploaded, so that's an awesome new offering. Some really great nuggets there. Big thank you to all of our current members of Logic Academy Pro, and as usual, we're giving away a free 1-month subscription to Logic Academy Pro at the end of the show, so as long as you've registered for the show, you will be entered to win that, so good luck. We had a Flame user group in Spain just about 3 weeks ago, and it sure looks like, I have a couple of pictures from that user group. It sure looks like it was quite fantastic. Andy was there. Stefan showed off Flame 2025. There he is. What more can you ask for? User groups are the best, and here's to hoping that more user groups are on the way to a studio near you. But until then, we live through these pictures. And my final announcement before we get right to it, not too 5 minutes isn't too bad, is Flame 2025, specifically Dun, 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 Flame 2025.0.1, the service pack for the main release, came out 11 days ago. So if you are at a facility that is waiting for that, and I say that working at a facility that told me that they were waiting for that before they update, then maybe it's time to upgrade. I'm hoping that it's time for me to upgrade to the latest and greatest 2025 has to offer. And with that, what a segue, because today, my special guest, who really needs very little introduction, and I hope that I'm able to introduce him properly. I think everything's working out. But anyway, my guest, I think he's probably the number one guest on Logik Live. No one has been on the show as much as Bryan has. And that's a testament not only to how kind he is with his time, how knowledgeable he is about what he knows, and how willing he is to offer and share with the community what he knows, which I think is great. So everyone, put your virtual hands together for my guest today, Bryan Bayley. Hello, Bryan.
Hello, hello, hello. How are
All
you?
is well. I think you're back. I don't know. I don't know if there was a technical thing. I don't know if we have to go into it, but I'm glad to see you here now. This is great.
I am here. As long as you can hear me, I think we're going to be good.
I can hear you. I've been breezing through everything. I didn't quite look at the levels, but I think the levels are good. So anyway, this is great. Thank you for being here. Hello. I hope you're having a wonderful day so far.
Pretty good. We've had some storms. I lost a tree this week from wind,
Oh
but
no.
it was probably on the way out anyway. So I've been doing some chopping, some axe work this week.
Wow. A moment of silence for your tree, but that's pretty cool. Flame artist slash colorist slash axe tree lumberjack, I guess. I guess that's the word
Yes,
for it, isn't
perfect. Yeah.
it? Well, I appreciate you coming here. The title of the show is Preferences, Presets, and Hotkeys, which, maybe that's a good way to lead people in here. But what it really is, like my personal summing up of what we're talking about here today, is pretty much an expansion on the two videos that I made for the Flame Learning channel, which talked about like version agnostic user profile, as well as the centralized configuration, and then just a little bit more about the Flame 2025 presets. What we talked about briefly when we were getting ready for the show is that I don't really have a lot of time to cover everything on those videos that I make for the Flame Learning channel, because they got to be quick and they got to be just nuggets. So I got to pick and choose. But this show, this platform, is a great way to kind of iron out the nitty gritty, to cover all of the stuff that we don't have time to cover in those short videos. And I really appreciate you being the one to do it. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate the videos you did, and I knew like you're not able to really delve into a lot of the details, so I thought the Logic Live was a good way to do that. You also had Fred on to talk about the new features in 2025, and he just barely kind of mentioned this because he wanted to get to the other like the new tools and stuff. But this is such a huge change that I thought it was worth expanding on a little bit more.
Absolutely, because obviously, they're very proud of, and they, for reasons, they have to really show off the match grain node and the lens distortion node, because those are the big hitters. But as you
Right.
said, the day-to-day artists like us who like don't need to be sold on the new features, the user profile changes, the hotkey change, like those are very important to us. And just to make sure everyone's super into it, Bryan has some really cool like little detail stuff that hopefully are going to open some eyes on new features and how he's working. Some hotkeys that he's going to be jumping into. So without further
Yeah.
ado, why don't we maybe jump into it? I think you have a presentation ready for us.
Sure. I've made a PowerPoint. Um, and also, I just want to say I hope Fred watches this video and approves of everything I say because, uh, I don't consider myself a complete expert on this, but I'm just trying to, bring what I know to everyone else. So, Fred, correct me on all my wrong points later. Um, but yeah, so the 2025 release came out, and there's a lot of things that have changed. You might not even notice, but if you know uh, what they've done and the reason they've done it, then hopefully these things work better for you now. Let's go to the things that are new. So the way the Flame user is handled, we're going to talk about that. The idea of the user, the project, in a shared environment is kind of permeating the whole software now. We've seen that before with bookmarks, and that's going to be even bigger now. Centralized configuration is a way for a facility to have all the machines point to the same place for presets, point to the same place for Python, all different kinds of things. So hopefully your machines all act the same in those respects. And then shortcuts or hotkeys, we kind of use those words interchangeably. There's a big kind of change to the way those are handled. The preferences are all kind of revamped, which sounds super exciting, right? And then finally, just a few things that are changed to the way your project initializes when you first load into it. So what I wanted to show was, first of all, to kind of the behind the scenes of all of these new things is that pre 2025, there was a lot of bloat kind of being created. And they're not huge files, but it's a lot of stuff that's just really unnecessary. I'm going to do a super sexy shell demo, as Fred likes to call it. And what I've got here is I've got 2024.2.1. And if we look in the presets, it will, let me clean it up here. So in your presets folder, when you load install Flame, it creates all these folders with all these different presets in it. Well, you can see some things like DVE, which hasn't existed for, I think, 15 years. That's like pre-anniversary edition. Some other things like deliverables, that doesn't really exist anymore. Some things are renamed, like this, what used to be called Morph. That's now now I'm blanking on the name of it. The name changed. But anyway, all of these folders were created. And in addition to that, like if I go into one, for example, like filters, and you see that there are, all these preset filters, but then there's also a presets within there. So if we look in there and list there's all the same files over again. And if you go to your project and into presets, there's all those same files again. So there's just like a lot of bloat, a lot of files being created. Are you with me? I've been talking for a minute, so.
No, that's good. Yeah, that's
Good.
all good. And now I think we're about to see that was what it was, but
Yeah, so there were all these different places where things might be saved, and there were duplicates, within each of those places. That's all been cleaned up in 2025. And the new idea is your user, that little tilde stands for, where your user location is, your projects, and shared. So everything is in one of these three places, and they're associated with either your user, the project, or shared across all the projects. All of those subfolders that you saw that were created, instead of it creating everything all when you install Flame, let me find my right window here. I got a few shells going on. Okay, so now if we look at presets for 2025, it's only created the folders for things that I've used or that presets that I've created. So it doesn't create all that bloat before it's needed. Subfolders are created on demand. So anyway, that's kind of like a backstory to some of the cleanup and things that they've done. The Flame user. So hopefully if you've seen 2025, you've seen this. Your user now is not a user associated with the version of Flame. It's your OS user. This means it's version agnostic to the software. So your OS user is your Flame user. You don't have to create a new user for every version of Flame now. And for some people, that's like, well, I don't really care. I do that once every couple of years. But for other people, if you're constantly staying on the newest version, like us on the beta, you're constantly trying different versions. You're always creating a new user, creating your hotkeys, modifying, all your preferences. So now your OS user has all of that stuff associated with it. Starting with 2025, that user is now backwards compatible. So for instance, if it's 2026 and you have your user that you've been using 26, but now you're going to another facility, they're still on 25, your user can be imported, exported, and work with 2025. And it knows to just ignore any new features or new things that have been added to Flame. And then I'll show this in more detail later, but the shortcuts files are cleaned up and changed from ASCII to JSON, which is a newer, modern kind of way to handle it. It's visually kind of easier to see, and it works better if you're trying to manipulate it with, Python or things like that. And like I said, you can import and export that user profile now. So when you go to a new facility, you go to a new machine, you don't have to start all over with your Flame user, modify it, change your hotkeys, all that stuff. Now you do need to have that new machine has to have a user, like an OS level user on it for you. So that's something to be aware of. Like we talked a little bit, Jeff, about how in my facility we just had a user on the machine, and then when you launch Flame, you used your Flame user. But we've now kind of changed, and so each machine has OS user for each artist. So that is something you'll have to kind of work around and figure out.
Yeah, it
Um,
takes some getting used to, and it can be since I made the Flame Learning Channel video, I feel like a little bit of a responsibility to talk to some of the people who are having questions about how they do it, and I think that what we both concluded is the bottom line is it's just different, and we have to come to terms with the fact that it may be a little slower for some workflows, but it's for the best for Flame as a whole. At least that's
yeah,
the conclusion that we came to.
yeah, I do think it's good for the future. Like this is something you're going to have to set up now, but you gain the benefit of not having to redo your Flame user every time you get a new version from here on out.
Yeah.
Um, this whole thing is designed to be as light as possible for easy import and export. I think the files are, like kilobytes, which I'll show here in a minute. And if your facility is big enough that you have an actual network user set up, whether that's Active Directory or whatever else, then you can go to those other machines, use that network login, and you don't have to worry about the Flame user on that specific machine. Another thing I'm going to show and kind of talk about is presets versus setups. So those the way they were saved and the words that were used to describe them have kind of been muddled a little bit, and they're trying to clean that up to where presets always means a template or something to start with, and a setup is something that is, like you created for a specific shot or for a specific show or something like that. So I'll dig into that a little bit more here in a minute too, which is right now, presets versus setups. So like I said, the template versus the setup that's saved for a specific shot. You can create. I'll show this in a second, and hopefully that'll be more clear. It's very clear now when you go to save something in batch, like a specific node, whether it's a setup which gets saved with the project or a preset. And once you choose preset, you can associate that with your user or shared. So I'll show that here in a second. Hopefully that'll be a little more clear. Another thing with this, the way these are saved, they're trying to make the presets more version agnostic. So like if you have a cool preset that you like to use a lot and you go, to 2026, it'll load there, and then the backwards compatibility means that it'll let you load it in the old version too. And it'll give you a warning. It'll say, this was created with a newer version of Flame. We'll load it, but just know there might be some differences. And there's a couple of nodes where they won't load just because of how complicated they are. The action, image GMS environment, and the burn-in and overlays, those are kind of like just too complicated to have that backwards compatibility. So the setup app I will show, and I've got it right here. So previously in the setup app, we didn't have this user tab, but this now is where you can import and export that user to take it to another machine or take it to another facility. You can change these to be different in Flame as opposed to your OS level user if you need to for some reason. Um, and just note, I don't have Flame running yet. If Flame is running, you can't import. You have to be out of the software to be able to import. And you have options here for importing just preferences, preset shortcuts, or everything. You can reset your user here if you want to. So that's new, and that's where your user is handled. Let's see, you can't import while Flame is running. There is an environment variable to change the path to your user, so it doesn't have to be like the Mac OS or the Linux OS default. I haven't done that and I haven't gotten into it, so that's an option, but I don't know how to tell you how to do that just yet.
The word environment variable scares me.
Yeah, some people I know dig right into that stuff, but that just means that if for some reason your user path is not the default, you can get Flame to work with that. An important note on this importing and exporting your user does not include tangent panel customization you've done. That's because tangent's a separate app outside of the Flame user. So just know that. There's no more user at all when you start up Flame. And I will show that just so you see how cool it looks. You start Flame now.
It's different.
All you've got is project stuff. So anything about the user is not here at all anymore. It's just not handled at this place, this point anymore. So that leads me to the centralized configuration. Any questions yet, or is everything cool?
So far, so good.
Cool.
And I just wanted to, like, just as a small, funny little aside, just thinking about the new features for Flame in this way. Like, obviously, when you have features like the match grain node, that's like a standalone thing. You can work on that, you can build that, you can show that off, you can have it, and then it's done. But with a feature kind of like what you're about to show, centralized configuration, and then some of the changes that we've talked about, user profile, it's like when they're developing that, it's like they have an end goal in mind, but in order to get there, there's so many invisible things. Like the first slide you showed was all the cleanup they had to do, and then the next thing was like revamping presets and setups. It reminds me of this one scene from a funny show I watched when I was like, well, a long time ago. Malcolm in the Middle with he wants to replace a light bulb, but in order to replace the light
Yeah.
bulb, he has like, oh, the cabinet's squeaky, and so he's replace. It's a lot like that, but we never
Yeah.
see that because it's like, oh, we just want to be able to export the user. Well, before we can export the user, we have to revamp the way that the structure is for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And that takes time, and so I can feel for them on these kinds of changes. It's been a long time coming, and there's even more on the way that this is laying the groundwork for that we're not
Yep.
seeing yet.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was saying before. It was like the if you just install the new version, start running Flame, you might not see all of these behind the scene things. But I think if people understand them better, you know the goal of what they're trying to do. Um,
Yeah.
so centralized configuration. This is the idea of having all your machines look at one network location to uh, get things that should be shared throughout the facility. So like presets or Python or stuff like that. Um, so far, what they've done this with is presets, setups, those user profiles, and overall configuration. And if you want to delve into this, this is that file where it is, and it's different for each Flame version, but there's also a way to set it up to where no matter what Flame version it is, it uses the same sysconfig file. Once this file is set up on that machine, anything you save that it calls shared, bookmarks, presets, all kinds of things, if it's labeled as shared, it goes to that location as opposed to the op/autodesk/shared location, which is the default. Um, you can also get into that configuration file and tell it only use this network location for this specific thing like Python or matchboxes. So if you want to granularize it, you can, as opposed to just everything. And the guys have told us that in the future, we might possibly see things like fonts. Like, since I can remember the first Flame I ran, we just had a symlink from discrete fonts to our network location with all our fonts. So maybe this would be a better way to handle that.
Wait,
If you're
wait, hold on. I'm getting a transmission from Fred. He says, "Oh, we better make sure we include the safe harbor statement on that one there."
maybe
So I, I, uh, I faxed it in from all the way from Montreal. So there we
don't
go.
make any purchase decisions on what
Purchasing.
I'm based on what I'm saying today.
This one's for you, Andy.
So anyway, that's a quick look at centralized configuration. If you want to get into that, you really should read up about it. I can show you that sysconfig file. So sysconfig.cfg. If you modify this path here to your network path, and that's where it'll send everything that's shared, you can set the default for where, imported geometry, where it looks for matchboxes, stuff like that. So I'm not going to go real heavy into this. Just know that that's there if that's something your facility wants to do. So the next big thing is this whole concept of user project shared. So we've got this, I guess, like the way they're going to try to organize everything now. It's kind of a big change of some things are over here, some things are over there. Everything now is going to be user or project or shared. So user-wise, on Linux and Mac, the path is a little bit different. Linux, your user slash flame, and Mac OS, this is how other Mac software, uses this folder. So Autodesk is trying to be kind of in line with everything else that Mac does. Your project is kind of the same where it always was, slash project and then the project name. And shared, we've had that shared folder, but now it's getting even more things that are going to be going into that shared folder. And this is where that sysconfig file could be changed if you want. So a little more detail on that. We've already seen this concept with something like bookmarks, right? So if I go to Flame and I look at my bookmarks, and actually I haven't made any for this project, or did I? Yeah, so there's the project level, there's the user, and the shared. So you can tag a bookmark as one of those three things. Well, now they're applying this same concept to all of these things: presets, exports, layouts, scopes. So I'm not going to go into like each and every one of these, but I'll show you a quick example. Like for instance, presets. So in Flame, I'm using a really cool filter.
Oh, and Brian, if you don't mind, could you just press the hide one there, just so that's out of the way for the rest of the show?
Oh, are you guys are seeing that?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Perfect.
cool.
Thanks.
Um, so I've got a filter, and when you look at presets, you have the presets that ship with the software from Autodesk, and they're kind of labeled underneath this Autodesk here. And I'll just do like negative so you can really see something's going on. But for instance, if I make my own filter, and I'm just going to modify this, and I really like the way that looks, if I go to save, I can save the setup, and that's going to be in the project. But as soon as I switch this to presets, I now have an option here that's user, and there's my user path that's already taking me there, or shared, and there's that shared path. So let's say I save this under user, Brian's filter. Now, when I go back to my presets list, there's a user kind of subfolder, and then everything I've saved under user will be there. So that's, like I say, the bookmark concept. We're getting that now in all these other areas of the software. I'll do something else to show you where they go when you do shared. I've got like a digital effect, and if I save this preset and change this to shared, now it goes to that shared location. And if you modify that sysconfig that we showed a second ago, it'll automatically go to that path, like when you click shared versus user. So it's kind of automated as far as you don't have to think about, like, am I saving it in the right place? So if I save that as a shared one and we look at presets, there's shared. One other thing I've already done, within Gmask, there's not a great way to do a perfect circle right in the middle. When you're working an image and you have a selective, there's that little circle you can choose. But if you're just doing a Gmask, there's no circle. So I've saved a preset. So under my user, I've got a circle and I've got a square, just so I can quickly get to those in the regular Gmask node. And those are
Yeah, that's a
presets
big
that will
one.
be available anytime my user is using software.
I love that. When you show me that, that was a really big one for me because I knew about the, I think I didn't know about the circle. I didn't know. So that was, thank you for that. That's a big
Yeah.
one for me.
Um, One other place I'll show you that just to show how versatile this is, like I have scopes and I've got these three. This is what I like to look at when I'm doing color work. And I've saved that as a preset. And there's that user, kind of subfolder again with my preset that I've saved. So if I had, something else that I did a lot and I switched between, two different scopes views, I could have those both saved there. Same thing with conform match criteria. So I've already noticed this. I've used this a little bit when you do match criteria and you say like, I never look at the tape, I look at the file name. See, now I can save this. What's checked and unchecked here under my user, project, or shared. And then that'll be, so if I add preset, then next time I come to this window, I can just choose that quickly. So anyway, this concept, the user, project, shared, this is going to be happening all over the place now within your project. And once again, all of these subfolders are created on demand when you need, once you've saved a setup or a preset to that location. A couple other things that they kind of cleaned up just to mention. Um, the old way that Matchbox, the node bin. So if you're in batch and you're looking at your FX nodes, this Matchbox bin of nodes, that used to be set in the setup app. So you'll notice here we don't have shader anymore, or shaders. And instead so it used to be in the setup app, but it was technically saved as part of the project. And similar to that, when you go to import geometry or start a PyBox, the default folder where it starts was an attribute saved with your user. And those could get a little confusing of like where I'm starting and there wasn't a way to change it either. Those things are all now part of that sysconfig file. So if you saw down here, I can tell Flame where I want to start if I'm going to import and where that node bin is for those Matchbox shaders. So you can add your logic shaders, if you want them to be in that node bin to that folder. So anyway, that was just an additional little cleanup thing. Everybody having fun so far?
I'm having fun. It's a really
Okay.
nice, thorough explanation. One thing I was wondering, I don't know if we have to answer this, but when I was making the video, I was like, it would be great, and I didn't mention this because I was scrambling to create that video. Um, like a list of all of the things that you can use in that sysconfig file. I don't know if there is one on the documentation page. That could be pretty useful just to see everything that you can do.
Yeah, I think the default file has everything like this in it.
Oh, everything.
And I don't know if there's even more you could do with it or not. I think this might be everything so far that you can
Because I don't
set there.
remember seeing well, I don't know. I haven't looked at it in a little while, so.
Hmm.
Because
Um,
like I know that you can do Python, like set the Python stuff, but the Python isn't there by default. But
yeah, you're right. I
could
saw
be
that
good.
somewhere. I'll look that up because I remember that instead of default here, you could have I think just Python as the what's in the quotes there.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
might
But
look into
anyway,
that.
time
Yeah,
for shortcuts. I'm very excited about this because you had some
cool.
good ones that I learned from.
Cool. So shortcuts have kind of changed. Well, they definitely have changed. The old way, so once again, we had to do some cleanup and some reorganization. The old way your uh, hotkeys, which they call them hotkeys, shortcuts, all of these different files were saved in this one location. So I've got this as an example somewhere. Hotkey. Yeah, so in the 2024 version, if we look at hotkeys, there's all these different files for different areas of the software. There's buttons and there's functions. And then if you modify something, it creates a new file with this .user. And not that you would necessarily want to do this a lot, but if you try to, modify it manually, I'm just trying to find one that I modified. Guide. So like if you look at the uh, text within it, that wasn't a good example. There's nothing in there. Anyway, it was all ASCII, just text, and not super easy to read, super clear, and tons of files here. Let me go back here. So now, well, okay, yeah, like I was saying, that if you modified something, it would add another file with .user. So there used to be a mix of using the word hotkey versus shortcut. They've tried to go through and just always use the word shortcut. And I even realized on my title of my presentation, I said hotkey, but it's actually shortcuts. So we're trying to call them
Oops.
shortcuts. The new way it's handling all of this. So Flame starts by looking at the shortcuts uh, file under 2025, and there's a JSON file for each area of the software. So let me try to show you that with this window. So now I'm looking at 2025 shortcuts, and I use Smoke Classic. It's the best, no debate, right?
I think everyone feels that way too, and no one has ever felt otherwise.
Yeah. So there's less files. It's cleaned up a little bit, and the .json format is easier to read visually. And what you'll notice is there's not those .user files. Those aren't in here. Anytime you modify a hotkey, that gets saved in your user folder. So on Mac OS and Linux, it's slightly different. But now, if I go to that location, so user preference, blah, 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 and I look in there, these are files of just what I've modified, like shortcuts that I've added to Flame. And what this means is, so Flame looks at that first file, and then it reads your user customizations that kind of overwrite anything that they apply to. And the way that works, it creates the kind of the user or the version agnostic version of your shortcuts. So, it used to be a big part of always having to make a new Flame user for each version, is because if they added shortcuts and you had something already customized to that shortcut, then it, would mess stuff up. So what they're going forward now with is it reads that first file, and then it reads your customization file, and it's going to keep your customizations over anything else new that gets introduced. So that kind of sounds like maybe a slippery slope or conflicts, but I personally feel like that is a better way to handle it. Like if I've taken the time to customize something, I probably want to keep that over some new feature taking over that hotkey.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think maybe a good way of thinking about it, maybe this is not the perfect example, but it's a close one. With the new match grain node, for example, there's a new keyboard shortcut for that special grain mode, and I'm already forgetting which one. I think it's one of the F keys, like F5 or something. And
mhm.
if you already had F5 bound to something else and you went to use that, it would be, even though that's a new feature, even though it's a new keyboard shortcut that wasn't used before, the keyboard shortcut would default to what you had set previously. But what you're saying and what we concluded is that it can be a bad thing potentially, because then you would not be able to use the new keyboard shortcut, not be able to use the new feature. You would have to know to go looking for it in the keyboard shortcuts and change it. One
Right.
thing that I was saying maybe is like, if the new feature comes out, maybe the first time you open the application, it can give you a warning like, hey, this new keyboard shortcut was added and we couldn't set it because you had that set. That could be a nice
Right.
solution, but that would have to be a feature request probably.
I think that might already be a feature request. I'll go look, but that sounds familiar, like somebody asked that question. Because you definitely want to know it's available to you for if
Yeah.
you have a new tool that uses that hotkey or shortcut. Um, but I do think, like if I've gone to the trouble of creating a custom shortcut, I probably want to keep that. And then
Yeah.
knowing, hey, you're using this already, what do you want to use with this new tool? That would be a nice feature to have.
Yeah. But we'll get there.
Um, so also as part of this whole revamp, what you should know is creating a shortcut only applies to whatever base profile you're working in. So I'll follow me for a minute because this will lead down a road here, hopefully. So if I go to my shortcuts and I've got this right here set to Smoke Classic and see how I have some things I've customized. If I switch to Flame, all of those customizations go away. So those customizations are associated with the Smoke Classic key set. And the idea behind this is they had some questions of, well, I like using smoke hotkeys when I'm working in the timeline because that's more like a traditional kind of timeline editor. And I like the flame hotkeys when I'm working in batch because I've been using batch for 20 years and I know those hotkeys. So the idea behind this is you can have different hotkeys customized for the flame and the smoke classic, and you can switch between those two profiles. And so, well, first you think, okay, well, anytime I click on timeline, I got to come in here and change that to Smoke Classic. Well, there's now a shortcut to cycle through your shortcut profiles. So we're going a little inception here. There's a Python hook you can call whenever you change tabs down here. So I haven't done this yet, but I'm going to work on it, and I know it's possible. When you click on a different tab, you can have a different hotkey set load a different profile. So that's something you could automatically set up. When I go to timeline, the keyboard shortcuts in here is switch to Smoke Classic. And when I
Yeah,
go to
that's
batch,
such a cool, classy solution to
yeah,
a very manual, like former way of having to do it. So that's a really cool idea. If you want that, that's awesome.
yeah. And a lot of my customization I've done over the years is because when I first started learning Flame, I also had Smoke, and my facility used both of them, so I knew the hotkeys for Smoke for timeline, and I knew the Flame hotkeys for batch. And so some of my customizations are, I like the Smoke Classic, but when I'm doing and working in batch, I want this and this. So I'm going to be looking into that and seeing if that works for me. So that's just saying that Python, you can able to switch those base profiles. Now, there was a question, can I add my own base profile? And that's not possible yet. I don't know if it will be, but you only have these four base profiles. Some use case I thought of was like, say you're someone who does roto a lot and you have very specific keys you want to use while you're doing roto. You could hijack this Luster key set and make that very customized to when you're just doing roto or when you're just doing paint. So that's just an option there where you have four base profiles to work with. You can modify one for unique use if you want to. So we looked at the shortcuts window a little bit. Another new feature is that you used to only be able to just revert everything back to the default, to the factory. But now if you have one selected, you can do the button here and revert selected. So you can affect just the one and reset it to the factory default. Like if I forgot what the factory default was, I don't have to manually put it in. I can just say revert that selected one. Um, Now, it's also possible to set different shortcuts whether you're on Mac OS or Linux. And I kind of wrapped my head around this, but it gets complicated. If you know you're like a freelancer, and sometimes you're going to be at a facility that uses Mac, and sometimes you're going to be somewhere that uses Linux, you could set this up to where whether you're on Mac or Linux, you have different shortcuts. And the way that works is when you change a shortcut and you go to set and keep that on this little drop down, the default is set, but you can also set on current OS. So you would have to go through, set your hotkeys, your shortcuts for, you know, Mac OS, and then go load it up on Linux and do the same thing on Linux if you wanted to have those be different. So that's, I don't know, it seems like a little overkill to me, but maybe that's something somebody might be able to use.
Well, it's good to have the option, I guess.
And then while we're here, I was just going to share some of my favorite shortcuts that I've created over the years. Um, we talk about this a lot in online finishing. You want to be able to quickly switch between, you know, primary and secondary. The other way you can, you know, compare things is to cycle through all of the modes here. Well, I really only use primary, secondary, difference, and side by side. So I've assigned hotkeys to each of those, and it's the alt and the numpad numbers. Let me see if it says numpad on the shortcuts. Uh, yeah, pad one, pad two. It's actually control, not alt. So anyway, like I have an edit, I have a primary and a secondary, and you have this with Smoke. I think it's like F15, F16, something like that. But I've just changed them to be that numpad numbers. I'm holding control and hitting one, two, three gives me the side by side, four gives me the difference. Because you know I don't ever use the split views and the grid view. I just really use those for specific views. So I assign those hotkeys. And then another thing I'm doing a lot is all of these different kind of desk options here. I've assigned hotkeys to all of those because I'm constantly, you know, looking at guides or looking at compare mode, so I don't have to always come down to this menu and click them.
Yeah, and Annie just said the
Uh,
same thing that I said yesterday, and that's that. And I'm still, I haven't made it a priority to manually set those, but I'm in the same boat too. I only ever really use the difference and the side by side. I never really use blend or grid or I use the anyway.
split,
But
yeah.
I've like I still cycle through the key. Just it's like, oh, I missed difference again. I got to go back for another pass, and it hasn't bothered me enough. But seeing it here, I think that this is the push that I needed to set them explicitly.
Yeah. Um, Another thing I'm doing a lot is, you know, you want to see the time codes, so you pull this down, or you can do it with the little plus minus over here. So I'm doing that a constantly, excuse me. So I actually set those to hotkey. I've got Alt. I'm holding down Alt, and then on the numpad plus and minus. So plus expands it out, minus brings them in. And in addition to that, when you're, you know, you're zoomed way in, you're looking at this clip, and I want to see the whole timeline, but still have the vertical expansion. And the default home key, you know, fits it horizontally and vertically. So what I've done is I've reassigned that hotkey to something else, and then my home hotkey, so I'm like zoomed way in here, is in this menu here. There's a fit to width, and what that does is it fits the whole timeline in, but it doesn't shrink down the vertical uh, setting that you've had. I don't know if people have deal with that as much as I do. I'm constantly trying to look at those in and out time codes. Fit to width, show that. Two things I'm constantly doing that just for whatever reason didn't have a hotkey, at least in the smoke hotkeys. So ripple, turning ripple on and off, depending on what I'm doing in the edit. So I just gave it a simple key. So I'm hitting E for ripple E to turn that off and on. And then another thing that I'm constantly dealing with is like if you have a source, I've got them all open already. Let me close them as sources sequence. So you've got the little green arrow, it's a source. And when it's this green source tab, you can't really cut and edit it. You want to open it as a sequence, which is pretty simple, but you're constantly having to go to the right click menu. Well, in Smoke Classic, there's no hotkey or shortcut set for O for open, so I just went ahead and assigned that to O. So now I can quickly just hit O to open all those. Or if you click on a reel and hit O, it opens all of them.
That was a great
Um,
one. When you showed me that, I was like, why have I not done this? Because I am
yeah,
opening and closing all the time, and that's a really great idea.
if I'm constantly going to the context menu for something, I'll try to hotkey it because it's
Yeah,
just that one extra little step you have to do every time.
it's a great idea. And it's something that you might not think of because it's so muscle memory to just right click. But yeah,
Yeah.
great.
Um, I don't know if we have time. I'll try to get through preferences here. We're getting kind of close. Uh, okay, preferences, which is super exciting, right? Super sexy. If you remember 2024, you hover over preferences and you get another little sub list with the options here. Well, they kind of just did away with that, so that when you hit preferences, you go straight into it. And we've got that same concept over here on the left: the user, the project, and not necessarily shared, but system is kind of like the shared. So user, there's tons of stuff in here that's been reorganized. General used to have just a whole page full of junk, and they've kind of moved stuff like if it really applied to batch or action. So they've moved preferences around. Just know that the first time you start it. But also, I think it's broken down really good. Like project, you might come here and set it up the first time you launch a project, and then you don't have to worry about these. The app version, all that is right now is back burner, so I don't have to deal with that. And system is stuff that you want your whole facility to be on the same settings for like channel roles and path translation. So that should be something that's shared between all the machines. Um, Preferences, I think I just said all this. Reorganize. There's that level on the left side, user project. General got cleaned up. The old preference for your start frame is gone. So this is something that might catch people the first time they come in here. There's no more, I think it was under batch VFX, the start frame number when you make a new batch or a batch effect. That is completely gone from here. And the reason is because that is now associated with your project. So in the project settings, when I create a new project or if I go to manage a project, that's where we're going to establish our start frame. So that might catch some people. You might be getting some posts on the forum about that.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because I remember the 2024 video that I made on start frame is now relevant in some aspects. So it makes me a little sad.
Yeah, yeah. So that's on the project window. Many of the settings that used to be in batch are now in the preferences window. So it used to be that when you were in batch and you go to batch press, there was a ton of stuff in here. That is now actually in preferences, batch VFX. So all of those different things that used to be there, they just got moved. Um, a few preferences I wanted you to just know about. Hopefully, people know. First of all, you can now, this is new, the source timeline. There's some options for it. So that is when you're working in the timeline and you've got all your red sequences here, you've got this green source sequence. And if you're like me, I don't really need that there. You can now close that. Close that and it goes away. That's one of the preferences. You can also just say, so I have it on can be closed.
That's the default.
It,
Yeah.
it's also possible to just never show it or always show it. Exclusive to sequences mean only show that source if it is a sequence. So that's a new preference. Something I talked about at the New York user meeting, and this didn't have a tooltip until 2025, so it was a little bit of a mystery. But this is when you're using connected segments and you have a source that has multiple layers, like an EXR or a Photoshop file. When you change the layer that segment is using, what happens to connected segments? Do they follow and also change, or do they only follow at the source level, or do they not share that? So that is something you'll want to know how you have it set if you're using, like, for instance, legal text from Photoshop and you have it in a bunch of different spots and it's all linked. If you change this one from one layer to another, it's going to change in all the others.
Yeah, very important if you're using that workflow.
The media panel, the thumbnail icon. This is something I made a feature request for a while back, and Fred replied, "You can do that already." So when you're looking at your media hub and the little icon, let's make them large. The icon for this clip here, you can actually change that. Well, first of all, there's an option that you can park on a frame. I think this has always kind of been here, but if you park on a frame, then you can set frame as thumbnail icon and it'll update. This isn't a good visual example because it's not a whole lot different, but there is also a preference for the default in media panel, what frame to grab that icon from. And if you're like me, like I always have sequences that have 1 second of black. And so all of those icons are just black. But if I go to frame 25, then it actually picks up the first frame of the actual content. And then something that I don't know why this isn't the default, allow tearing. Um, in, I don't know, the good old days, I don't know how long ago, Flame was designed to where it displayed every single frame that it rendered, but then it started getting so fast that it's able to render faster than it can play the frames back. And if you don't have this setting on, you're bottlenecking yourself. And I forgot where it was already. Players and monitoring. Allow tearing. So that just means don't throttle rendering in order to try to display every single frame. And I don't think that's the default when you first start Flame. Someone might correct me on that, but I think you got to come in here and change that. Any more thoughts on preferences?
No, Andy and I are both in amazement about the thumbnail setting, which I think is great. Great solution to that funny problem. The tiny little thing about thumbnails that I think is a little bit annoying. I remember I had like a grain overlay, and I don't think that the thumbnail cared about blend modes. I think it just takes the whatever that thing is. So I saw like just
Yeah,
grain for every one of my timelines. It was a little silly.
yeah, it does. It takes the result of whatever layer you're parked on, also not the composite of that layer.
Hmm.
So a lot of times, like I'll start with a shot that has legal on it, and the icon is just like the legal on black because it's
Yeah.
not really compositing that.
But
Yeah, maybe that's
that's
something
okay.
we could get. And then real quick, this is the final thing, just some changes to the way the project starts when you start up. So there's no longer my bullet points got out of order here. When you make a new project, it doesn't make that empty sequence anymore. We don't ever need that. All the projects now have the same initialization. It used to be that if you use Flame hotkeys, the project loaded into batch, and if you use Smoke hotkeys, the project loaded into the timeline. And so I don't know if maybe that was a good idea, but maybe not. It's now uh, everything, all the different profiles all start up in the timeline, no empty sequence, and the frame time is displayed in the little player window. So you might see frames there, and you can change that. There's a hotkey I do in Smoke to change that quickly. So those are just things to know when your project starts. This is one other thing from clip start. So if you're doing a reformat and like change time code or whatever, it used to default to from positioner, and now it starts on from clip start. That kind of makes more sense, right? That's what you probably want to do most of the time. So just those little things. And the ever important progressive mode and text node. As I don't know the last time I've touched anything interlaced. It's been a while. So that's it. I think we're on time too. Wow.
You nailed it. You nailed it. And I think, let's see, I think there weren't too many questions. I think that's a testament to how clear you were and how great the presentation was. So thank you for that.
Awesome.
I
hope that helps
maybe
people that, like I said, it's not a super sexy new feature, but I think if you understand, especially that user project shared concept, you'll be more organized and know where things are being saved.
Yeah, exactly. And as the new versions come out, we'll see more improvements that build upon the foundation, big changes that they've made here. They're big changes now, but hopefully they'll allow us to make some even cooler stuff in the coming years.
Totally.
But until then, and for now, I think thanks for coming on the show. Bryan's going to join us on Zoom right after this. But thanks for coming, Bryan, and I really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for the thorough explanations and expanding on what I started.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Cool. For now, we're going to give some stuff away, right? It's the prize time. Prize time. Hey, here we are. I'm going to give away 1 month of Logic Academy Pro. So I will maybe do what Andy does and I've never done before, and that is to shuffle the list. And let's see who's going to be walking away with a month of Logic Academy Pro. It's none other than Hannah Wilk. Congratulations, Hannah. Logic Academy Pro, 1 month to Hannah. Richard Betts, yeah, sorry we haven't done much merch lately. There's someone I gotta talk to about that. We'll see. Let's see. But for now, let's give away 1 year of Boris FX Optics. Who is our lucky winner of Boris FX Optics? None other than Kevin Matthew. Congratulations, Kevin. Boris FX Optics to Kevin. What a show. What a day. Congratulations to the winners. And now it's time for some closing. Andy, that's great. I'm so glad. I just pressed the play button. You're the one who set it up. So thank you for that. I have to check in with a person or two to figure out if there is a show between now and then. But the then is Fire Flames. June 23rd, Andy will be talking all about Lucid Link, which is bound to be an excellent episode. But stay tuned for more information about the weeks as the weeks unfold, and we'll see if there's something else we're sneaking in there. If you haven't already, check out the forum. Head on over and do so at forum.logic.tv. While you're there, why don't you also sign up and head on over to Logic Discord, where we're having some more informal chats and hangouts. The Logic podcast has been quite active over the last few weeks, and the latest and greatest is from Amanda Elliott in her NAB 2024 recap. If you want a taste of Logic NAB, then this is the podcast for you. She chats with a bunch of us who were at NAB, got their impressions, what they saw, what they did, chatted about some of the events that we threw, such as the master classes that a few of us taught. Again, if you want to hear about that, check out the Logic podcast there by Amanda Elliott. We are clocking in at 2,260 subscribers here on YouTube. I say it every episode, the number keeps growing, but the goalpost keeps moving. So, of course, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, because that's what I'm supposed to say. I don't really know what it does, but that's what I'm supposed to say. If you'd like to support what we're doing here on Logic, consider becoming a patron by signing up at patreon.com/LogicTV. Be sure to check out the Logic merch store if you're feeling like swagging out. A big thank you to Boris FX for sponsoring Logic Live. If you'd like to save 15% on all of their offerings, you can head on over to logic.tv/BorisFX and click on these links to take advantage of that awesome savings. And a final thank you to Looper, the newest sponsor of Logic Live, the latest and greatest in streaming your client sessions. We have an affiliate link with them to give away 1 month of their Plus plan for free to new users. Just use the URL on your screen here, tinyurl.com/looper-logic to take advantage of that awesome deal. And that brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to Bryan for your time today and for sharing the deep dive into these new features. Bryan is joining us over on Zoom to take part of the patrons Q&A, just to dig a little deeper and answer any questions we didn't have time to get to during the show. So I'll see the patrons over there. But for now, thanks again to everyone for being here. I appreciate you all, and I will see you next time on Logic Live.